In a city, there are 10 police patrolling jeeps provided for the security of residents. Each patrolling jeep has 3 policemen with inspector, constable, and driver. Patrolling jeep make a wireless system to make calls, and we understand from the information that there is information which are codes are required for activating the wireless system. Four patrolling jeeps over here. Four patrolling jeeps receive every call made by an inspector. Two patrolling jeeps receive made by a constable, and one patrolling jeep receives every call made by a driver. So driver can make only one call, constable can make two calls, and a inspector an inspector can make four calls. So let's look at the information now, the number of received calls and the number of dial calls. So if we sum up all the dial calls, that will be the total calls made by these people. So it is 30, and if I talk about the total number of received call, the sum turns out to be 82. Now let's create an equation, that is calls made by inspector plus constable plus driver turns out to be 30. We understand the calls received. For an inspector, every person have received 4 calls. For constable, 2 calls would have been received, and for driver, single call would have been received, and sum turns out to be 82. And solving this, we get 3i plus c equals to 52. Now, on further solving the question, we look for the information as given the equation was 3i plus c equals to 52. So we can rewrite the statement I equals to 52 minus c by 3. So these are the different possible values for inspector, constable, and driver which are possible. So we can take constable as 1, 4, 7, and 10. Accordingly, the number of calls made by the people. So this is a table that we can draw, and we can look for solving the questions depending upon this table only. In this question, police patrolling jeep number 2 had received calls from only 3 police patrolling jeeps. Then what would be the lowest possible number of police patrolling jeeps from which police patrolling jeep number 7 received calls? So for this, we need to look for the table that we have already, that is given to us. The number of received call by Jeep 2 is 15, and that has been received by from 3 different police patrolling stations. So if we look at the sum of 3 numbers in dial call turns out to be 15, that will be only 5, 6 and 4. These 3 sum turns out to be 15. So police patrolling Jeep number 2 would have received call from Jeep number 9, Jeep number 4 and Jeep number 1. Now, let's assume that no driver has made a call from these 3 people. So, what we can take that for the Jeep number 7, they must have received the calls from any of these 2. So, could be 6 and 4, because as we are looking for the minimum number of possible calls received by the Jeep. So, it will be 2, that is 6 plus 4 turns out to be 10. So, the answer to this question would be 2, that is D option. Now next look at the next question for the set. So what could be the maximum possible number of calls that can be made by the constable? So for this question we need to go back to the table that we have created. Constable can make a maximum of 19 calls. So accordingly the answer for this question will be the A option. So the A is the answer for this question, 19. In the next question, if the total number of calls made by all the inspectors was not less than the total number of calls made by the constable, and the total number of calls made by the constable was not less than the number of calls made by all the drivers, then what could be the minimum number of calls that could have been made by the drivers? So let's get back to the table that we have created already. We'll get the answer directly because these are the only possible cases. By looking at the scenario, we look for the only case number 4 and case number 5 will satisfy this equation. So these two cases are there when inspector have made more calls than constable, and then constable has made more calls than driver, and inspector more can make again equal calls with constable and him. So the minimum number of call in this case turns out to be 4. So the answer to this question will be the second option. Second option will be we need to look for the 4 calls will be there. In this question, we again need to look for that inspector should not have made less calls than constable, and constable should not have made less calls than the driver, and we need to look for the maximum number of calls. We had two cases over there where uh, the inspector has made 13 calls, constable has made 13 calls, and driver has made 4 calls. And the other case was inspector has made 14 calls, constable has made 10 calls, and driver has made 6 calls. So the total number of calls maximum case would be of 6. So the answer is third option.